I was just looking at my Mother/Earthbound collection when I thought about the first game in the series, Mother 1. Mother 1 was released in Japan on July 27, 1989, to a moderate success, selling 400,000 copies. The game was planned to be released in the US in the fall of 1991. It was completely translated, localized, and set for release, but was cancelled for releasing too late in the console's life, for the Super Nintendo had just released. Talking gameplay, the game is a top-down RPG with random encounters. Oh boy, the random encounters. The chance of running into an enemy in this game is a little too high than it should be. Apparently it's really high because the game's development was rushed, which made the chances of running into an enemy messed up. This game doesn't sound so bad besides a bad random encounter. Well, now that's settled, let's get to the meat and potatoes of the game, the plot. So, the story of Mother 1 starts in the 1900s when couple George and Maria get abducted by an alien race. The couple was told they had to take care of an alien child named Geeg, or Gigu, or Gig, I don't even know anymore, which has no later appearance afterward at all, which is totally not sarcasm. Maria took care of Geeg like a normal child, unlike George, who was a journalist back on Earth, who wanted to report on the technique known as psi, or PSI, which is what they used. George eventually escaped back to Earth for some reason. Nobody questioned where Maria was, but I guess it worked for the plot, so I guess it's fine. Forward 80 years in the town of Podunk, where you take control of Nintendo, which his house is under attack by something. Anyway, all it is that a doll is possessed, and when you beat it, you get one of the 8 melodies you have to collect in order to finish the game. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the whole game's story. I've already been working on this script long enough. Instead, I'm going to talk about some of the dungeons and main plot points of the game, like parts that are important. So the first town is Podunk, which has 3 out of the 8 melodies in the whole game. So this is my first problem with the game, the pacing. So 3 of the melodies are in the first half, those 3 that I just mentioned, and 1 is like midway through the game, and 3 of them are at the end. The problem is that none of them have bosses. The only one that does is the one that's midway through, and I will mention it later. But, the problem is that there isn't really a challenge for, bosses to the player. Except for the encounter rate, which might substitute for the absence of bosses. Anyway, Podunk has a department store, a hospital, and a mayor's office. Underneath that is the Podunk Cemetery, which is the worst part of the game so far. There is a chance of running into zombies, which are really, really good and really, really tough. So if you ever want to get through this part, you better grind. Besides that, the melodies you find in order are the doll at Nintendo's house, which I mentioned, a canary chick at the cemetery, which the canary chick you can get at the department store at the really top floor for free, pretty much, and the zoo, which is north of the second cemetery. Yes, there's 2 cemeteries. Speaking of the zoo, now let's talk about the first quote-unquote dungeon of the game. I hate the zoo so much. I hate it. This zoo has got to be the best example of why grinding in this game is flawed and almost required to even remotely play or enjoy it. Besides the zoo, there isn't much else in Podunk. After finishing the zoo, the mayor will open an area you can head north to, which is north of the zoo, and you can reach a cave which has the first entrance to a place known as Magicant. Magicant is ruled over by Queen Mary, who tells you to collect the melodies that you've collected for most of the game so far. Southeast of Queen Mary's castle is a dungeon. It's the best place of grinding in the game so far, but it's not really too fun to traverse. Although, that might be a bonus because the Japanese version is a lot worse than the North American version. After reaching the end of the dungeon, you reach the second town in the game, known as Marysville. Marysville has the first permanent party member in the game, known as Lloyd. Lloyd is, he's a guy that has bottle rockets, I guess. That's really it. He just likes explosives. The only way of Lloyd wanting to join you is by giving him a bottle rocket at the first factory in the game. Side note, these factories have some of the worst looking maps ever. It's literally just large open space after large open space, and it's just not fun. After Lloyd joins your party, you head north to the second factory, which has the same flaws as the other one, although it's not really as bad because you have a second party member to grind with. After setting off a rocket at the end of the second factory, it will open up the railroad, which opens up most of the game after that. After leaving the factory and heading north to the train station, you can access the towns Reindeer, Spokane, and Snowman. The first town I go to is usually Reindeer. I don't actually go to the town. The only reason I go there is to take a hat from an old woman, which is the end of talking about reindeer, because there's nothing else I need to do ever again in the town. The next town is Snowman, which has, in my opinion, the best track in the game. It is used in all the games in the series after this, but I would say this version is still the best one. Anyway, after heading east of the town, you reach a house with a girl named Anna who, after getting the hat, will become the next permanent party member who doesn't have any side thing except for Lloyd. So you don't have to lose any brain cells going through a stupid dungeon except for the fact that the part leading up to Snowman has enemies that are really tough to get through, so think about using Rewind if you have the chance. Right now we're about halfway through the game, so that means let's talk about something else besides the plot. Let's talk about merch and media related to the game. I will add one rule, and the rule is that I won't count anything unofficial or custom, like a custom amiibo or a plush, although I will briefly mention mangas and books, since there is a surprising amount of them. Anyway, let's start with strategy guides. The only one I'll be talking about is the Mother Encyclopedia, which is basically the Japanese equivalent to the Earthbound's player guide included with all copies of Earthbound. Unlike the player's guide, the Mother Encyclopedia wasn't included in any official release of Mother 1 from what I know of. There was a book called Mother Novel, The True Story, which, from what I've heard, is the opposite of the true story, including the fact that in the book, Ninten has blonde hair, wasn't even named Ninten, instead was called Ken, and was also apparently pretty mean to the other party members. Next is figures, which Mother 1 has had 2 sets of figures released through Band Presto's sets of Earthbound figures, based off of the models used for promotional art and stuff like that, which are apparently not clay and are paper mache, which I only found out through Twitter. One last thing I'll mention is the Mother album. Yes, you heard that right, the Mother album. I've got to say, this is a really good album just by the vocals. Oh yeah, did I mention they're vocals, not just in-game OST used. They're full vocal tracks. A track that stands out to me in the album is Pollyanna, I Believe in You, which is a certified banger. Here's a little snippet. I believe the morning sun, always gonna shine again. Well, that was swell. Now let's get back to talking about the game. After leaving Snowman, you arrive in the town of Spokane, which has nothing except a spooky house which you get a key to just south of the house. The house is a pretty mad dungeon, especially since the common enemy is the ghost enemy all the way back from the first cemetery in Podunk. After getting the 4th melody from a piano and leaving, you head back to Marysville Station, head northeast to end up in the Yucca Desert, which also has peak sound design up there with Snowman. It does have some problems such as being boring, hard, and boring. So boring, in fact, that the creator, Shigesato Itoi, hid a message in the game stating that it was his most boring part of the game, so I guess it wasn't just me who thinks that. After that, there is a cactus which has the 5th melody, and after that, the only part that matters here is the tank, which you can only get after riding the plane enough times to get access to it. You then go to the Monkey Grotto to access the next entrance to Magic Hand. Usually when you reach this point in the game, you should be level 25, but I usually don't reach the level until the last part of the game. So that's why grinding in the dungeon will be helpful. So like I said earlier, grind, grind, grind. The only reason I mentioned the level is because there is a dragon which contains the next melody, which you can only access him and fight him if you're level 25. Anyway, the fight does have a bit of challenge, but it is easy if you use a rope to tie him up. After the fight, you exit Magic Camp once again, and you end up in another cave, and after going south of that area, you'll reach Youngtown, which the name doesn't lie because all the residents are kids. The main reason to enter Youngtown is to get teleport out from a baby, which is really helpful, and it makes the train completely obsolete. Anyway, after heading east from the town, there is the swamp. You can make the swamp not fun if you don't know the route. On the way through the swamp, you can meet Pippi, which gave you the Franklin badge earlier in the game, which I forgot to mention entirely. Now, after going up, eventually you reach the town of LA, which the name has no connection to the abbreviation of Los Angeles at all. There is a live show that you can only access if you get a show ticket. After going into the live show, a guy will allow you to go on stage and perform, which isn't strange at all. But like the Zero Suspicions about George, it was just there for plot reasons. Anyway, After the performance, the local gang leader Teddy will want to fight, and after fighting, he will join your party and replace Lloyd for a bit. After that, the next place is Mount Itoi, which the name is a reference to the game's creator, Shigesato Itoi. Besides that, you get to a rest stop, which after leaving to the other room, Teddy will leave for a bit. After you enter the room, Anna will stay next to the door. After talking to her, a cutscene with Ninten and Anna will start dancing together. I would say this cutscene is good, but some of the presentation isn't. This is all because 1. You can speed up the game if you're playing in the English release. 2. Everything is a text box that pauses after opening, and it's literally a yes or no prompt, which just gives the whole thing a feel like it's a choice and not just a cutscene. Anyway, after that, Teddy enters the room and a boss fight starts with a robot. The fun part is that you don't have to try, and it's scripted and you have to lose. After that, Teddy dies. That's it, he dies. The screen cuts to Lloyd on a tank, and you respawn at one of the rest areas, and Teddy is laying on the bed, and this is the end of Teddy. Lloyd is back in the party, and now access to a then broken boat that Lloyd fixes. The boat takes you to a lab area that gives me flashbacks to the factories from earlier. Anyway, there's a robot named Eve, which is OP in terms of attack, but after Eve joins you, the lab breaks and you end up on the dock. After reaching a point on the mountain, you run into a robot who, in battle, is stopped by Eve exploding, killing it. After the fight, in the rubble of Eve, there is the 7th melody. After going forward more, you reach a grave, which is actually the grave of George, who is Ninten's great-grandpa. After his speech, you obtain the 8th and final melody. We are now reaching the final part of the game. If you really do feel like it and you really want to, go and check out the game. Anyway, back to the game. After getting the 8th melody, use the Onyx hook to teleport to Magicant for one last time. After visiting Queen Mary, you play the complete melody for her. After hearing it, she remembers she is Maria, who is Ninten's great-grandma. After that, Magicant disappears completely, and you teleport next to a door, which was right north of the grave. After entering, you are in the corridor that leads up to the final boss, Geeg, who, after entering the battle, tells a bit of a story on how mad he is at humans because of George. When he finishes the story, the only way of stopping him or winning is singing the song using the new sing option in the menu. After singing the song to him enough times, he surrenders, the ship leaves, and the battle is over. After the ship leaves and the scene ends, it cuts to an epilogue where it shows that Anna has reunited with her mom, who was trapped in the mountain. Teddy gets better and back to performing. I guess he didn't die, after all. All the adults return to Youngtown, which ruins the name. Lloyd is now respected by his fellow students, and Ninten returns home. And that was the whole game. I really did think it was better than what I first thought. I would say that Mother 1, with all its flaws, is still a gem in the NES library. But forget that, stupid game. One last thing I need to say is, if this video does well, I will do a video on Mother 2, which is also known as Earthbound. Also, for anyone who is wondering, no, I don't plan on stopping speedrunning, but I will be doing them less often as compared to these videos. One last thing, if I do put out a Mother 2 video, don't expect it to be anytime soon, because these take a surprising amount of time to make. After all, it did take 4 to 5 months to work on the script, so keep in mind, it will be taking a bit.